Hello and welcome back to the course. Today will be our day 5. I hope everything is going well. As usual, if you have any questions, make sure to drop them in the comment section and I will reply to them within 24 hours. Perfect. So today we will be going over two topics, basically one topic, but it has two sections. The name of the topic is loops. Just let me write it down. All right. There are two types of loops in Python. The first one is called a for loop, and the second one is called a while loop. We will be going over both of them and also apply. We will also be applying them to different situations, with on completely different context. So, we get to learn how exactly those loops work. Okay, so the first thing is a for loop, and the second thing is a while loop. There you go. Perfect. All right. So now let's jump into the for loop. Okay, before we jump into the for loop, I just want to give a basic explanation of what exactly are loops. Loops are used in order to iterate through a bunch of stuff. Okay, so for example, you got a list, right? And you have a bunch of elements inside of it. If you don't know what lists are, I would recommend you to go watch day 4 video because I introduced Python lists in that lecture. So yeah, that would be helpful for you guys. So yeah, so you could use a for loop or any kind of loop basically on a list. Now, what that will allow you to do is basically go over each and every element in the list and perform a certain task on them. Okay, because if you were to not use a loop, okay, then you would have to manually perform those actions on each of the elements. That will be time consuming, plus that's going to take up a lot of code lines, and again that will lead to a messy code, which is not a good thing, right? So yeah, loops are really helpful. I believe they are one of the fundamentals of programming, so make sure you are able to grasp what we're going to do today. Perfect. So the for loops. For loop. All right. So in order to make a for loop, the syntax is the first thing that you have to write is, of course, the keyword itself, for, then a random variable name. The variable does not have to exist. You can just write down something random right now. Just a placeholder text for now. Placeholder for placeholder in placeholder. All right. Okay, perfect. Now, this is basically just a basic syntax of for loop, okay? Now, everything that you want to put inside of this for loop, you have to put them on the following lines. But you will notice one thing, and that is each time you click on enter after this colon, there's going to be some indentation towards the left side of it. Why? That simply means that anything that you're writing basically belongs to this piece of code, okay? Belongs to this block. All right, perfect. So yeah, you click on enter, it's automatically going to indent the code. In case you're not using REPL, you're using some other kind of IDE, and it does not automatically indent it, then all you have to do is, click on the tab key once or click on the space key 4 times. I personally prefer to use a tab key because it's just a lot easier, you just have to click it once rather than clicking on the space key 4 times. Perfect. Okay. So now what exactly goes into these two places? The placeholders, what exactly goes into them? Let's make a list, all right? And let's call that my list is equals to a bunch of random numbers, okay? 5, 3, 6, 3, 7, 1. There you go. So we just made a list. We're calling that my list. And inside of it, we got 6 variables. The first element is, sorry, not 6 variables, pardon me, 6 elements. The first element is 5. The second element is 3. Third element is 6. Fourth is 3. fifth is 7, and the sixth one is 1. Now, the first element is going to have an index of 0, the second element will have an index of 1, and so on, right? Remember, indexes always start from 0. So yeah, keep that in mind, okay? All right. So we just made a list and we wrote down the basic syntax for a for loop. Now you might be wondering what exactly goes into these placeholder stuff, right? Okay, let's remove them. Now let's say you want to perform a certain task on each and every one of these elements, okay? On each of those, you want to perform it on a 5, 3, 6, 3, 7, 1, and so on. So what you can do is, each of this number is basically, you could call it anything. In my case, I'm going to call that a number, right? I'm just going to give it a short form of num for num in my list. Now, what that means is for each of the number in my list is this variable. So each and every number inside of this is going to be the task is going to be this whole thing that we enter inside of this block will be applied to each and every element over here, each and every number. Okay, now you could call this thing anything. You don't have to call it a number, you could call it blah blah. It could be called anything, okay? But it's better if you give it a sensible name, not just something random. Because when you come back to it in the future, I mean, I don't think it's going to be that big of a problem. When you come back to it in the future, you probably know why you wrote this. But still, it's just a bad habit, It makes the code look bad. Not gonna lie, okay? All right. So let's just call this num. The for num in my list. And what I want to do is I want to simply print each and every of this number, print out each and every number inside of this list onto the console. We know how to print a number, right? You're simply supposed to use a print function, and then inside of the brackets, write down the number. We're going to do the exact same thing over here. We're going to say print. But now instead of writing down the number itself, we're simply going to write down this num. Okay, so now what this will do is it will execute this for loop on each and every element inside of my list, because I'm saying my list over here. And for each of those elements, it will simply perform this task. It will simply print them onto the console. That's it. All right. Let's run it and let's see what happens. There you go. So it says 5, 3, 6, 3, 7, 1, right? Now, if we were to now use a for loop, then, we would have to do something like print, then 5, print 3, print 6, and, so on. That would be really time consuming, as I mentioned in the beginning, and also can take up a lot of code lines, which is not a good thing. Therefore, all we're doing is simply making use of a for loop in order to print each and every number onto the console. All right. So yeah, just the important thing to remember over here is the syntax for a for loop. If you manage to grasp that syntax, then I believe it's going to be really easy for you to use it, okay? All right, the second thing is the task can be anything. You don't have to always print it, right? You can put anything inside of it, anything that you wish to do with these numbers. Maybe what I want to do is find out the number that the maximum number out of all of these, right? In order to do that, I could use an if statement. I went over if statements in day 3. Go over and watch it if you don't know what if statements are. So, okay, so let's say we want to find the maximum number. So let's make up a variable, okay, and call that max num. Currently, it's going to be equals to none, all right? None is a data type as well. I did not exactly introduce it before. I mean, to be honest, there's nothing special to introduce in this. If you want to make up a variable and not store anything inside of it, you could just simply write down none. Now so you could say this is a placeholder variable now, because you do have a variable called maxnum, but it's storing literally nothing inside of it. Okay, it has it doesn't have a number, it doesn't have a string, nothing. Okay, so it's just a placeholder, what do you call it? Variable. Okay. Now, what we can do inside of this function is, or you know what, actually, instead of saying none, let's just say 0, okay? That'll make our task a lot easier, okay? So now inside of the for loop, what we'll do is compare each and every one of these numbers to this. And in case this is greater than this number, then we would simply replace max number by that number. So let's say if this current number on the list, if num is greater than max num, then all I want to do is replace the value stored in max num by this new number, right? So we can simply say max num is equal to num. Only and only if the number is greater than the maximum number. If that's not the case, then we're simply not going to do anything, right? Because if that's not the case, this block will not be called. This block will not be executed. So we will end up skipping all this and simply go over and execute the for loop for the next element. All right. Let's try to run this now, okay? And yeah, so once this for loop is done, what we can do is simply exit the for loop and print the max number. All right, print the max number. Now you can see one thing, that this print function is not inside the for loop. Why? That's because I exited it. In order to exit it, you simply have to remove all the indentation, right? So initially we were something like this. We were typing stuff in here. We had some indentation on the left side. Why? That's because we were inside of the block of a for loop. But once you click on backspace from there and you just go back to the default position, well, now you have exited the block of a for loop and you are, in the block of a main, the whole main program. Perfect. So let's run it. There you go. It says the maximum number in all of this is 7. And well, that's correct, right? So yeah, you could literally do anything with the for loop. You could put any kind of task in here. The only thing they have to keep in mind is the syntax. For num, okay, for num in my list. My list is the variable name of your list. If it was something like example, then instead of saying my list, see, now it's underlined in red color, right? That means nothing called my list exists. So you could simply swap that with example. There you go. So for num in example, that's going to do the exact same thing. Perfect. All right. Let's move on to the next thing. Oh, wait, let me just make sure it's recording. Oh, okay. Perfect. Now, the second thing is, yeah, you could basically apply a for loop onto literally anything, I gave you an example of how to apply it to a list. You could also apply it to a string. So let's make up a example string, okay? Example string. And tell that to be equals to maybe my name, all right? Farhan. So example string is equal to Farhan. Now you go over to the next line, click on next line again, and let's write down a for loop. In order to write down a for loop, you say for placeholder in placeholder. Now inside of that block is where you put down all the tasks that you're supposed to do. Okay, so before we do anything, let's comment out all this code, right? Because we don't want to execute it again. We've already worked on that part. So perfect, yeah. All right. So now, what do you think? What should we put in the place of these two placeholders? Take 5 seconds, and try to think. What do you think should be placed in here? Maybe pause the video or something if you want more time. Okay, so in the place of the first placeholder, as I said, you could literally write down anything. You could say anything, maybe just anything, okay? Anything. You could put anything in here. And for the second one, you have to basically write down the name of the variable. In this case, it's going to be example string, right? Now, what we basically want to do is simply print out each and every character in the string. Each and every character in my name. So F, then A, then R, then H, then A, then N again. Now, in order to do that, all you have to do is make use of the print function. So print brackets, and then this variable name, right? Anything, the variable that you just created. So anything basically belongs to each and every character inside of your string. So initially when you run a for loop, anything is going to be equals to F. Then it's going to enter the block, and print anything. Simply going to print F. Once it's done with that, it's going to go over to the next line and realize there's nothing for it to do. So it's going to go all the way back up, okay? Again, it's going to do the exact same thing with A, then R, then H, then A, and then N. After it's done with N, it's not going to go back because it's going to realize that there's nothing after N, So meaning my job is done. I'm done. I could just leave now. And that's where the execution of a for loop basically ends. Well, let's try to run this. There you go. F A R S A N. Perfect, right? So now we know how to use a for loop with a list. We also know how to use a for loop with a string. Now the second thing that I want you to tell you is sorry, not the second thing. The third thing is how to use a for loop with the range function. Okay, there's this function in Python called range. What that function does is it generates a bunch of integers between the provided boundaries, including the boundaries as well. And then on each of those numbers, the user could perform, apply some kind of a task. Okay, so in order to do that, you have to say for, let's just call it mynum, for mynum in range from, let's say, 1 to 5. Okay, simply print out the number for me. So there you go. Run it. Oh, wait, you know what? Let me just comment this. We don't need to run it again, right? There you go. So now you can see it's gonna print all the numbers within the range provided. One thing to keep in mind is that the lower range is actually included, but the upper boundary is not included. So you can see 5 is not going to be printed. It's only going to print 1, 2, 3, 4. If you want 5 to be printed, then you'll have to set this to be 6, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There you go. So the range function, all it does is it generates a bunch of integers in the given range. That's it. Okay. Perfect. So yep, that's all I wanted to show for loop. Let's check how long this recording has been. 18 minutes, not bad, honestly. Probably going to be less than 25 minutes, which is a good thing. All right. Now the second thing for today, a while loop. While loops are also a type of loop, they are pretty helpful as well, but majority of the people, they prefer to use for loops. I mean, there are some tasks which, can't be performed by using a for loop, or even if they can be performed by using a for loop, it requires a lot of code. Okay, so in those moments, people tend to use while loops, but, in general, the majority of the tasks, they can easily be performed by the help of a for loop. So people prefer to use that instead of a while loop. All right. So first of all, the syntax of a while loop, right? So all you have to say is the while condition, and then a colon, and then enter. You'll go on to the next line, and you can see again the code is pretty much going to be indented now. So anything you type is going to be indented. Why? That's because currently we are inside of the while loops block. We're not in the main programs block. We're inside of the while loops block. Okay. Now what exactly does condition means? So condition can be set as a placeholder text for now. What you're supposed to put in there is basically some kind of a condition that needs to be fulfilled, that needs to be successful in order for this while loop to be called, in order for the while loop to be executed. Okay, So this condition needs to be fulfilled. Let's make up a random number. Okay, let's make up a random variable and call that x. Okay, so x, and set that to be equal to 0. So what I just did is make a variable called x, and I set its value to be equal to 0. Now what I want to do inside of the while loop is print all the numbers from 0 to 5. Okay, 0 to 5. I can print all the numbers from 0 to 5. That's it, nothing after that. In order to do that, all you have to say is, first of all, you have to change the condition, right? Because we want to print all the numbers from 0 to 5. So you can say while x is less than or equals to 5 if the variable x is less than or equal to 5, then we're simply gonna print the value of x. If that's not the case, meaning if the condition is not being met, simply exit it. Okay, stop executing this while loop and go on to the next line over here, and we have nothing over there. Okay, so let's run it. Oh, sorry. Pardon me. Yeah. So while x is less than or equals to 5, we're simply gonna print x, right? But each time we print x, unlike the for loop, it's not gonna increment x by 1. So in the for loop, we use a range function, right? And we simply said between, so from all the numbers from 1 to 6, print them. And once it was done printing, it automatically changed into the next number, right? Once it's done with 1, it's gonna go to 2, then 3, then 4, and so on. A while loop is not gonna do that. You have to manually increment the value of x or decrement the value, or do whatever you require to do, all right? So what we're gonna do is simply add 1 to the value of x. Or else what's gonna happen is, if we don't do this, then something known as an infinite loop will occur, okay, all right? An infinite loop basically means it's going to continue printing 0, 0, 0, infinite amount of time. It's never going to stop, and that's probably gonna, crash your IDE or maybe your computer, because it's gonna eat up a lot of resources on your desktop. So yeah, I mean, this kind of a while loop, an infinite while loop of this kind, is pretty, pretty small. It's not going to take up that many of the resources, so it's not going to crash my computer. But if you have a very, a really troublesome while loop with a bunch of code inside of it, some really hard stuff for it to perform, it's most probably going to end up crashing your desktop. So make sure not to create an infinite loop. All right, infinite loop is going to be a huge trouble if you do end up creating that. Make sure to not create an infinite loop. There you go. Make sure to not create an infinite loop. Perfect. Okay, so let's run it again. There you go. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So now we are printing all the numbers from 0 to 5. In order for this task to be fulfilled, we're simply using this condition, right? So while x is less than or equal to 5. Let's say we want to print all the numbers until maybe 10. So you could simply say while x is less than or equal to 10. There you go. Let's say we want to print all the numbers until 9. So you could say something like while x is less than or equal to 9. Or maybe you could say while x is less than 10, right? Not equal to, but less than. If the value of x is less than 10, simply execute the while loop. There you go. So what's basically happening is, initially the value of x is 0. It's gonna come over here, and it's gonna check, is 0 less than 10? Well, yeah, 0 is less than 10, right? So it's gonna simply go over here and print x, basically print 0, and then increment x by 1. So 0 plus 1 is 1. Then it's gonna come over here again, and it's gonna check, is 1 less than 10? Well, yeah, 1 is also less than 10. It's gonna do the exact same thing and make it 2. It's gonna, continue doing this. Now let's say we have come to a point where x is equals to 9. So it's gonna say, is 9 less than 10? Yes, 9 is also less than 10. So it's gonna come over here, print 9, and 9 plus 1. So x is going to be 10 now. Now it's going to check it again. Now is 10 less than 10? Well, no, right? 10 is not less than 10. It is equal to 10, but it's not less than 10. And a condition only says if something is less than. So it's simply going to ignore it all and terminate the whole execution of the while loop. All right. So yeah, it's pretty easy if you manage to grasp the basic syntax of each of the loops. I mean, of course, the first time you go through something, it's gonna be hard, right? It has to be hard. But yeah, if you have any questions, just make sure to drop them in the comment section. And as I said, I'll reply to them within 24 hours. Hopefully, a lot sooner than that, maybe 12 hours or something. And yeah, that's it. And yeah, one more thing, I'm gonna post some the link to the questions in the description section. So make sure to go ahead and do them. That word is really hard to pronounce, not gonna lie. Okay, perfect. So take care. Have a great day, have a great night.